The Celtics take a commanding 3-1 lead after a stressfully intense Game 4 in Atlanta behind solid performances from a now maskless Jaylen Brown and a suddenly springy-looking Rob Williams. We have the world's leading expert on Rob Williams with us tonight to break it all down next on First to the Floor.
Who is going to be first to the floor here? And it was Marcus Smart, as he usually is.
Brown drives.
That's not the first time we've seen a superstar in green and white sacrifice the body.
Welcome into another episode of First to the Floor. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Jake Eisenberg is here with us as always, but we're also joined by a very special guest, longtime friend of the show from NBC Sports Boston, Chris Forsberg. Forsberg, how you doing, sir? Welcome back.
What is going on? Thank you as always for letting me come back. Sometimes you get worried that the invite won't land.
Never again, that Forsberg guy. No, we're very happy to have you back. Thank you. It's been great. Obviously, I mean, let's just get straight into what's happening with the Celtics, of course. That's why you're here, and this 3-1 lead, this dominant 3-1 lead for the Celts. But first, I just want to ask you, what is it like to finally inhabit the same world as a healthy Rob Williams? It feels like we're finally back there.
Yeah, I hold on. Let me
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, so before you answer, this is a safe space where we've conducted and consulted all the relative, spiritual guides in the world to ensure that we're not jinxing anything. So we've done our homework there. So go ahead.
That's good to hear because as soon as I open my mouth about something, it tends to backfire. So it is. I mean, probably the most exciting thing about going into these playoffs was the general health of the team, and to keep seeing these injury reports and only Danilo Gallinari's on there, it's almost jarring. It's like this isn't the Celtics that I know. Not like at any time in my life, from Bird to KG's knee to Isaiah's hip to Kyrie, and it just feels like in perpetuity we've lived with injuries, but especially now in this era with Rob. And so it's refreshing because I think it's easy to forget. If Rob was healthy last year, I think they have a really good shot of winning it all. And I think it's lingered with him. I think it's lingered with everybody to know that if you just had maybe a little bit better luck there with health, that they maybe could have got to the finish line. And so it's refreshing to hear them all talk about how they need to savor this moment and how it needs to be out there. And then certainly, especially with Rob, I'm trying to savor every second because every time he jumps, I sort of do the
Yeah, he's I've never been a player that I think, as a Celtics fan, where I've been so worried every time he does anything out of the ordinary. And I love him for it. The diving on the floor. Look, First to the Floor podcast to get that rebound, tap it back out to Jaylen. I'm like, love to see it, but it does worry you. But yesterday was probably, I don't know, the first time I really started to sweat in the playoffs. Did you feel like that was kind of the first proper playoff game?
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of people have said to me, like, does Joe need a close game to sort of show he can make adjustments and play the chess match? And I don't know, I think he'd just as well roll through these things if you could, but certainly at some point you were going to hit a little bit of adversity. It wasn't a surprise that the Hawks were as good as they were in Game 3. Teams are always desperate in that situation. And I mean, very rarely have I thought it's been the other team outplaying the Celtics when they lose during the season, but that was clearly they were just on another level. Their bench was otherworldly. So look, it took an otherworldly bench performance, and the Celtics still barely got stiff-armed at the finish line. So I felt pretty good coming out of that, and I like the response. Again, so much of what I'm gauging in the early go here is, did they learn from last year? Do they know they need to take care of business? Can they make their lives easier? And so again, I'm scared to say these things before Game 5, but it feels like that maybe that it's somewhere in there. They understand, take care of business, make this journey a little easier, because especially as you start to look around, things are lining up a little bit. And, while you're healthy and while you can get some more rest, let's make this journey a little easier.
Yeah, look, that was a really, really stressful game 4 there. I've sort of forgotten what that had felt like to sit and actually watch a game like with that much angst. So it's kind of good to feel the return of that from a fan perspective. What was the biggest factor in this win in Game 4 for you, for Forsberg?
Well, I mean, you see the title I've chosen right here is,
yes.
No, so I think it was twofold. I think the fact that the Jays were so good at the finish line. I mean, obviously Jaylen's going to be the story because the whole mask coming off and how good he was. But both Jalen and Jason just consistently making the right plays in the fourth quarter. Even Jalen like dumping the ball off to Rob for those 2 dunks late. Just showed that, it's sometimes they get lost in trying to score or make the hero play. They just did everything right at the finish line. And I was certainly, my big concern, I guess, was first 11 minutes or whatever. And Jalen's going through it 1 for 7. I'm thinking, man, like it's been kind of a rough series for him. Is there something? Is the hand bothering him? Is there like the shoulder that he was grabbing at in game 1? Or is he just like in a funk and his confidence shot? I don't know. So it was really refreshing to see him sort of figure it out and and him and Jason be the focal points of getting them to the finish line. But big picture wise, like I can't help but go back to Rob because it's sort of if we needed another example of how he raises their ceiling and just puts them on a championship level when he plays, and I didn't think he was like otherworldly yesterday, but it was clear he got challenged to go out and rebound. And so he did. Him and Al took that challenge on, played the double big a ton. And so I think it just showed that when they need to and when they're all healthy and when they're committed, like, yeah, it's just a reminder that they are a championship level team. And honestly, give credit to the Hawks. Like, that's the second game in a row they've gone over 120. Like, that's a good offensive team. They just can't play defense. And they do stress you with the way that they can score the ball.
Yeah, on the last pod, we kind of laid out that the Hawks, out of all of the kind of bad teams, Hawks, Heat, Timberwolves, and Nets, they're the only one of that group that has an elite unit. Like since the deadline, top five offense for a reason. Like as much as the discourse around Trey was, how much is he going to be traded for after the first 2 games? He's been really good in the second 2 games. And outside of can you hear that buzzing, Ben? I feel like is that me?
I think it's coming from Mr. Forsberg here.
Oh, it is? Hold on. Watch this. I'll unplug this and it should go away.
Okay.
Let's see.
Oh,
I hear it too.
Back with the buzz.
I don't know what that is. Hold
It's
on.
a bit of live shooting here.
Let me play with some wires while you're talking. Mute me
okay.
while Jake's rambling and I'll
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was me, so I'm getting like a yellow light on my microphone, but is it?
No, you're okay.
Is it gone
No,
now?
it's definitely
Okay.
on Forsberg's end.
All right,
so
cool.
He's muted while he's doing some troubleshooting there.
We'll sort it out.
We'll edit
Yeah.
this out of the pod.
Yeah, of course. The magic. The live viewers get to enjoy this part.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought like outside of the Celtics being the clearly better team, and outside of the Hawks having literally one of the best bench performances in NBA history, those 2 things, the Celtics came ready to win a playoff game on the road. The playoffs are never pretty. A lot of the time are not pretty. And as much as the Hawks are not, the best team, the playoffs get grimy. Sometimes you can't worry so much about the percentages, even though they ended up shooting 50-40 yesterday. I don't feel like it was a very smooth performance yesterday, like offensively throughout the game. Like you got a little rocky in the third quarter, which we'll get into. So I think the biggest difference was they came ready with that mentality. Tatum with the 3 blocks. He spoke about the rebounding. Obviously, Forsberg said they played double bigs more. 16 minutes of double bigs yesterday against a team like Atlanta that clearly made it a focus. And that's what I love about the Celtics team, that you want to make us play one way. We found a little weakness potentially. Let's just ramp up double bigs an extra 10 to 12 minutes, and that issue is just pretty much gone. So that's what I thought. I thought there was playoff adjustments. I thought there was playoff intensity that they didn't bring to game 3. And Atlanta was there. As you said, Forsberg, like they came to play in game 4. Like DeAndre Hunter gave Atlanta Hawks fans a reason to believe again. Like he was incredible. So I thought it was a mentality thing for the most part as well.
I think that's what made it so stressful. I wasn't expecting, I think many of us weren't expecting Atlanta to bring this much game, and yet in the last 2 games they have. So like you said, credit to them. And then, Joe Mazzulla talks about winning on the margins so much, and going back to your Robert Williams point there, Forsberg, I think you can tie so many of these margin stats to his presence. So points in the paint, 58-46 in favor of the Celtics. Fast break points, which is Rob grabbing rebounds, kicking the ball out immediately, 18-8 in favor of the Celtics. Bench points, obviously Rob coming off the bench, 30-21. We finally won a rebounding battle, 49-42. And then I've added in there, obviously not related to Rob Williams at all, but Celtics, they shot 50% from 3 in the fourth quarter. Jason Tatum, 16 points in the fourth quarter. Jaylen Brown, 12 points in the fourth quarter. Really, finally, the Jays kind of stepping up there and actually like bringing it home from otherwise good performances around the roster elsewhere in that game. Offensively, 46% of the Celtics shots came from at the rim, which is top 100th percentile per cleaning the glass in the playoffs so far. So obviously, clearly dominant. When they got to the rim, they shot 68%, which isn't world-beating, but it's obviously very efficient. And then I'll add to that Al Horford, 0 points in this game, but the spacing king, allowing all of that room at the rim for the Celtics. So I think that's why he was able to get a plus 17 there, despite the 0 points. Defensively, Mr. Forsberg, was the Celtics drop coverage effective enough in this game, do you think?
It was better, right? Like it felt like they were maybe just a little better at the pickup points, and Al didn't sink when he didn't need to. There was a couple instances where, and like I hate like coming down on Al. It's just because he's been very good. It's just sometimes there was no roller, and he was backpedaling to the rim, and Trey would just hit that floater, and next thing you know, it's like it just snowballed. And so I just thought they were just more crisp overall in every aspect of what they did, and the bench not being as good certainly plays into it. Now you're they're not, now there's a more of a load that Dejounte and Trey got to carry, and that feels a little bit more overwhelming to them. And so it's just like in general, I think overall I'll walk away from this series saying I hope the Celtics are a little bit more crisp and don't have quite the many lulls defensively moving forward, and yet the challenge will be different. Like when you start looking ahead, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but defending Embiid is going to be different than defending, and if Embiid is out there, and defending the Sixers overall is going to be different than defending the Hawks. And so it's on Joe to make sure that everything they've tightened up as this series has gone along is clicking from the start of whatever comes next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people get game 3, the drop wasn't good enough. Everybody's like, can't believe we're playing this drop again. But like you watch switching Al Horford onto Trae Young was definitely worse. And these playoff games, sometimes it's literally about doing the game plan better. Like you even go back to, I think of the Hawks Bucks series where it was the conference finals. It looked like Brook Lopez couldn't play at all in that series. And then you go back, you have 2 days off, you tighten up, you watch film, and then the next game, you adjust that drop a little bit, and it's a lot tighter. Is it a little bit of a hot take to say that maybe that Derek and Marcus will have an easier time defensively with the Sixers than they will have with Trey and Dejounte?
I don't think it's hot. I think it's pretty, like, you just feel pretty good about that. They'll have their stretches where they get hot, but I don't think it's going to put as much stress on you as Trey does when you have to worry about shooting from 40 feet and attacking the basket and all that. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. If you want to have a little fun as a Celtics fan, I would recommend looking up Harden's 2-point and rim numbers as a way to get ready for next round. But yeah, I thought the defense was definitely improved. Is there anything you see from the Celtics that you would like them to clean up? So going into game 5?
Like even Marcus, I think is everyone has been up and down at times. Like I was worried for Al when he got put in isolation so much, and I'm thinking, okay, now he's looking like a 37-year-old. And then I think about the Sixers series. He just gets so motivated for that matchup that I have no concerns that Al is going to be like on another level, going up against them, going up against Embiid, and knowing how much he got blamed for all that team's failures after being there. And so I it's hard to quibble right now. I was talking with B-Rob this morning. We were joking. Has it been pretty much like the perfect series for the Celtics? Like you get Derek White game early. You're not quite, peaking. You're still plenty of room for improvement. You haven't had the Tatum game. You haven't had the Jaylen game necessarily. And yet you've really been dominant for most of this series. And you've still taken a shot and had to adjust and kind of learn things. So yeah, like I don't have a lot of discouraging thing. I guess, the weird thing that jumps to mind is like Rob wasn't himself in game 3. And you just can kind of tell on a night-to-night basis where, for whatever reason, he's either too contest happy and abandons the rebounding. And Joe's been good about trying to snap him back on that. But yeah, that's I guess it's just whenever any of these guys steps outside themselves a little bit. Marcus with his 3-point shooting, Rob with like trying to block everything. As long as Joe can reel them back in, then I feel pretty good about where they're at.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I don't want to make it this simple, but the Hawks shot 41% from three over the 2 games at home. And compared to their 35% season average, not a good 3-point shooting team. And then they shot 27% from three in the first 2 games in the Garden. And maybe we'll transition to how confident you are about Game 5 and how the Dejounte Murray suspension kind of factors into that. I wasn't sure if we're going to have that news for the podcast, but luckily we do. I thought it was obvious. As soon as I saw the video, I was like, you saw Grant, and you've seen how they've kind of been, laying down the law in the rest of the playoffs. I think they had no choice. You can't like just go up to the ref and like kind of headbutt the ref, like, for being honest.
Yeah, and it's funny because we all were doing it the Zapruder film, right? Like, did he make contact? Is there graze of the shoulder?
The intent.
I guess the point should be that even if you don't make contact, you can't be that aggressive. You can't be, especially after the game. Like, I've seen Marcus go up to officials after games plenty of times and sort of just have a conversation. Sometimes it gets animated. Sometimes like someone's got to pull him back, but it usually gets fine in that instance. When you're this aggressive in it, and just like you said, pointing out the Grant, I think about Rondo back in 2009, I think it was. And there was just a precedence. And I don't think you can let that happen and then, just kind of turn a blind eye to it. Or maybe if it was, and I hate to say it, I wonder if the league thinks differently if it's 3-2, Game 6 or whatever. Yeah. But the Hawks were cooked as it was, and this just makes it a little easy. My only fear is the usual thing with the Celtics is that
that's right.
Whenever they think it's going to kind of be easy, it gets a little bit more difficult. And so it goes back to the start of this conversation. I just hope that they bring the necessary energy for Game 5, because they can't just show up and think, okay, just because they don't have they're really what's been their best player in the series out there, that it's going to be easy. Although I do think it'd be pretty easy to put the Hawks in a position where they're just thinking, okay, 1, 2, 3 Cancun. But you got to jump them early and then you can kind of downshift a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think Dejounte Murray necessarily conducts himself that way at the end of the game. If he didn't already have Cancun, in the back of his mind, I think it's clearly over from anyone's perspective at this point. But I just hope that it's not Sadiq Bey time, and that comes more from a neurotic Celtics fan standpoint more than any sort of sense of realism. But we talked about that drop coverage earlier, and the biggest beneficiary of that has been Dejounte Murray. So with him out of the picture, you'd hope that the Celtics can coast while still taking their opponents seriously in this Game 5 and wrap it up here in 5. Let's move on to some individual performances. We've sort of touched on it already, but we've got you, Forsberg, on the pod. So let's circle back. Let's do a little bit more Time Lord while you're here. 13 points, 15 boards, 3 offensive rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. Just a nice filled out Time Lord classic stat line there. 5 of 6 from the free throw line as well. So very efficient getting to the line and finishing at the free throw line. 29 minutes, Forsberg. I guess it was kind of necessary for him to play that much, but it's definitely a notable spike in his minutes. Do you think that's sustainable? Are we going to see around 30 minutes for Rob going forward?
Yeah, I think it's, I guess the Philly series is weird, right? Because they've tried to keep his minutes staggered with Embiid. And so you'll probably see him more. There'll be some overlap, but I do think Al will be on the court in those instances, and he's just more in that roamer role. And then you can kind of let him be maybe solo big at times and maybe just match Al's minutes with Embiid when able. Although I guess Al's not going to play 40. So you're going to have to buy some time where it's some combination of other bigs there. Maybe that's when Grant becomes super valuable and getting the double will lineup out there for stretches. But I think the best thing for me is just, sitting down with Rob before the playoffs, and he kind of reaffirmed it after the game last night. Like, I don't know if there's been anyone on the team that Joe Mazzulla has been hotter on than Rob. And you can see it a lot when they're coming off the court. It's usually like he's running over to Rob with a point of emphasis or, something that he wants to hammer home. And I just think he understands how important Rob is. He knows that Rob has all that potential. And it felt like before this game, not only did he challenge the team to go control the glass, but I think it was Rob in particular. And it's like, you got to get those rebounds. You got to be your normal self on the glass. And so it was good to see Rob really buy into that. He still was a little tip happy in the first 5 minutes or so, where he's always trying to just slap it back out. And then eventually he just started corralling everything. And he had one great one, I think, with like 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. He just went right up and over Collins. And so that's what you need. Like never have four factors been such a talking point in Boston, but Joe has made it like a daily conversation. And so controlling that glass is just, it's going to be paramount just when you start looking at the path and with the fact that it's probably going to be Philly and Milwaukee moving forward. And, you're going to have to make sure you're controlling that. And like you throw in those blocks there and it just adds up to the full Rob experience.
Yeah. Jake?
Yeah, I think once he rubbed off whatever the slippery stuff was on his hands in the first quarter, like I feel like there was like 4 or 5 rebounds or passes that just like popped out of his hands. I love that Joe's actually feels like coming into his own. We're getting like more and more as the playoffs kind of and the season goes along. But he clearly knows, as Forsberg does, and as we do, that Rob is the chosen one. Pick any, fictional character, Avatar Aang. My personal favorite's Gohan, Neo from The Matrix. Like, he has the hidden power. He just, once he learns how to harness it, it saves the world, and it brings in Banner 18. My favorite, you said 5 for 6 from the field, and like something that I always remember, and I'm sure Forsberg knows this, but Rob shot 89% from the free throw line in last year's playoffs, 25 from 28. Talk about playoff risers. That's clutch. You don't think about Rob as like, okay, I got so many of these big men, like Mitchell Robinson's been awesome in the Knicks series, but like that's a fatal flaw as you kind of get through the playoffs. I think they maybe tried to hack a Capella yesterday. They didn't quite.
Like one instance.
Yesterday. Yeah, and he made both. And he's a 60% free throw shooter. It's never going to be an issue with Rob. And it's just like, you talk about margins. Like, if you're a big man that's down there, can go 5 for 6 from the line, and you feel confident when you're up there, like, that's kind of an outlier from one of those big guys.
Yeah, and maybe getting ahead of myself here, but that surely shows potential going further into his career, maybe becoming some form of a mid-range, not assassin, but, capable from mid-range and really expanding his game there and adding to the spacing that he already provides the rest of the team on the court. We'll get to Jaylen Brown very quickly. I think I heard you earlier today, Forsberg, on winning plays, and you're sort of talking about, the mask situation. Like, yes, that's kind of the big story, the big takeaway. It's a little silly because it's like, he just took off a mask and it turned his game around. But like that obviously did happen. Like, he took the mask off and it was immediately better. So we have to address it. 31 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, 3 of 4 from 3. Discards the mask midway through the second quarter after a 1-7 start. And then we already talked about his playmaking late in the game. Did you get a sense from the Jaylen stuff after the game that, getting rid of the mask was really the catalyst for his turnaround?
It could have been anything. Like, he could have ripped off an elbow pad or like, put on a headband, whatever it would have been. It would have like changed the tenor of his night. He just needed something. I hate to call it placebo, but you need something that just tricks your mind into thinking like, okay, now I can justify. That's what the reason was for that 1 for 7 start. And he just was more himself. And so I don't know. I guess it was invariably going to happen at some point. He had been so good with the mask that we just kind of started to think he might go full Rip Hamilton and wear it forever. But it is nice that he can settle in, and, it does help to have a little bit of that extra vision, to not have to adjust it after every play, to not worry about it. And it didn't seem to deter him from being aggressive going to the basket. So as long as he's comfortable out there, and as long as mom isn't badgering him about having to take that mask off, I think we'll be okay. But again, I hate to be prisoner of the moment, but the slow start and just the fact that he was coming off a poor game 3 just sort of had me thinking like, is there something bigger at play here? And turns out no. It was just like he just needed to kind of get going again and do Jaylen things, and I think that's really important for whatever this team accomplishes moving forward.
If I have one request of Jaylen, and I imagine it's quite difficult when you're in the moment and you have the ability to rise up and throw down these awesome dunks, just don't right now, because every time he does, it feels like his hand explodes and there's blood. Was it his blood coming down his arm? Or I
think he cut his elbow on the play that Rob dove on the floor. Okay. So, right. But yeah, same deal. Come on, man. Scal isn't helping the moment when like Rob hits the floor and he exclaims, or like there's blood on Jaylen and we all freak out. But yeah,
have you told Scal that everybody watching like knows that anytime anyone does anything injury related, he's like, oh no, you can't do this to us. You can
never not heart stopping.
I'll try to do it gently, but yeah, when Muscala went from like pretty much dead to back in the game, that was the one where I was like, okay, I know what he does, because like I do the same thing. Like watching it, I'm freaking out, but I'm not also spooking an entire fan base in that moment. So it's tough when you're just that much into it.
Yeah,
it can be traumatizing.
I think it was so stark to see Jalen play that well, because like game one he scored a lot and was good, but he had was like 6 turnovers, and then the next 2 games definitely was up and down. And so to watch him play like peak Jalen in the second half, we hadn't actually kind of seen it for a little while, and you're like, oh, this is why he deserves to be All NBA. This is why we think that he's like the best number 2 in the NBA. To see him find that rhythm in that moment, that was really important. Like I thought Marcus and Jalen, when it was teetering in the third quarter, those were the 2 guys that really steadied the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Tatum, we mentioned 16 points in the fourth quarter, a nice padded out stat line, including 31 points and 12 free throw attempts and 3 blocks, like elite defense and pretty good rebounding as well. I think he had 3 rebounds within the first 90 seconds of the game. So clearly a point of emphasis from a coaching perspective. What do you think of Tatum's performance in this one? And just throughout the series so far, I don't think we've seen, you mentioned it, a good performance, so a solid, consistent performance from either of the wings so far, which seems folly to say because, 31 points each, obviously
right.
That's great. So what have you thought about them so far in this series? And does it give you any concern moving forward that, in a sense, while we've had great performances across the roster thus far, eventually we're going to need some elite performances from the Jays to actually win a title?
Yeah, exactly. I just keep waiting for the Tatum game. I thought that was going to be yesterday. Like you heard him say, take the blame for game 3, even though it clearly wasn't just his individual fault. And I just thought game 4 he would just go out there and dominate. So maybe I don't know. Maybe he doesn't have to do it at any point in this series. That's not a bad thing if you just stock up on the Tatum games for later in these playoffs. But yeah, there'll be nights where it's been a luxury when Derek White was your best player through 2 games, and all around efforts for game 4 and getting as much as you have out of Marcus and Derek and Brogdon off the bench outside of game 1. So I think the best thing about Jason has been, and it's so weird to say he's not dominating the game when he's averaging almost 30 per game and 10 like a double every night. But the blocks, I think we've said it multiple times over the years, right? He has all defense potential because of his length, his ability to jump passing lanes, his ability to alter shots, and yet he expends so much in offense that sometimes it doesn't manifest itself defensively. So good to see him go full Rob and block those 3 shots and be impactful. And I could use a little bit of that moving forward. Just I would take a downturn in total output from Tatum if it meant him being elite defensively, especially when the Celtics need to make that a calling card in tougher series.
Yeah, I think that's always going to be the underrated thing about Tatum is the all-around game, because he's kind of marketed by everyone as this 30-point superstar scorer, which he is for the most part, but the defense, and he can't do it throughout the regular season, as you said, and he shouldn't be expending all defense level energy throughout the regular season. But when he turns it up, he is in that top tier class of wing defenders. And I thought yesterday, he's been good defensively all series, but I thought yesterday was the best we've seen so far. And the rebounding, the margins, no one's going to talk about it, but he led the team in rebounding all year, and he turns himself into a power forward when he needs to, and he's had to do that throughout the season. And it's not going to get a lot of likes and retweets. We're talking about Tatum's defensive rebounding, but he's really, really good at it. And it's really, really important for this team, and partly why they're the best defensive rebounding team in the league. I thought he was great. And sometimes the efficiency is not going to be there with Tatum, but 31% from 3. And also he took 3 end of shot clock threes yesterday, partly his own doing, I think as well. But there was a few kind of hot potato moments which I think brought the shot quality down, but 11 from 12 from the line, that's the superstar mark as well.
Yeah, totally. I am nitpicking here, but we had some really good momentum towards the end of the first quarter. were up double digits, and then Tatum took like 2 really early shot clock threes, like isolation threes, just completely out of rhythm, no passing in those possessions at all, and then ended the quarter on a really heavily contested, like fading to the corner 2-point potential buzzer beater. 3 awful shots. I think we talked about like what can the Celtics improve on. Like Tatum can definitely improve on the decision making. Like I get, like it must. Well, actually, I don't get it. I literally cannot imagine what it's like to be Jason Tatum. But I would imagine you think you're the man, and you think that you're entitled to these shots, and he probably rightfully feels that way. But for him, as he matures as a player, I'd like to see him get away from those poor decision making moments and operate more within the flow of the offense. I think that's a pretty common criticism of the way that he conducts himself. Forsberg. Out of Smart, White, Brogdon, who do you think was the next most impactful in this game?
Ooh, in that game. White was really good in the first half. I think kind of kept them afloat with those 15 points, was it, at halftime, something like that. But Marcus, I think we said, that third quarter stretch was huge. And
that's the right answer.
Yeah,
Nice.
I honestly think throughout the series, Marcus has been, a little below the radar just because he clearly turned it up defensively in games 1 and 2. Wasn't enough to sort of save them in game 3. But just giving them the right amount of Marcus Smart jolt offensively in key spots has been important. So I do think it's a little bit refreshing. What was it? Was it game 2 when he got, or maybe it was game 3 where he got pulled with 5 minutes to go? Yeah, and I said, ooh, this is interesting. He's not going to be sort of on the floor. And then they realized, man, they really need his defense out there. They went back to him. But if he is able to impact the game on both ends the way he has, this is sort of, the perfect Marcus Smart balance between playmaking, giving you the offense when you need it, and still taking his defense up a level from the inconsistencies of the regular season.
Playoff Smart, man. I thought
Yes.
that I thought that honestly all series his defense has been phenomenal. I thought he was one of the only guys that really turned up in game 3. I thought and he tried to drag us all the way there. But yesterday in that third quarter, Jalen and him, the Hawks were making that run. They cut it to 3. DeAndre Hunter was 5 for 6, and Smart, Tatum was having that weird thing that you said, Ben, he just wasn't as assertive, and Smart was getting downhill. And a lot this is what's going to happen is defenses are going to shade towards the Jays and make it difficult for them to collapse the paint. And I trust Marcus Smart, especially in this matchup, and definitely in the next matchup as well against Maxey and Harden, to get downhill. And whether that's finishing at the rim or playmaking out of that, I really trust him with the ball in those high leverage moments. He's also shooting at 40% from 3 so far in the playoffs,
yeah.
which is nice. But 17, 6 and 5 on 60% true shooting. I don't know how many times Marcus Smart is going to have these massive playoff games in pivotal moments in series for there never to be. And we don't need to have any Marcus Smart, conversations about shot selection and stuff. It's when it's winning time, Marcus Smart has always been a massive reason as why we're making these deep runs. And I thought that yesterday was a perfect example of it.
Yeah, Marcus the Maestro Smart has finally returned. Good timing there being the playoffs. And, Marcus Smart is never going to be as open from 3 as he is against playoff defenses as attention shifts towards other more lethal shooters on the team. So it's good to see that he's actually knocking them down. He also had some really strong takes to the rim. For a guy who rolled his ankle quite badly in the middle of the game and has been banged up all season, he had some really assertive takes. He had one layup where he just drove directly at Clint Capella and climbed him like a tree and finished over him. It was ridiculous. So that's really good to see.
And that dunk was nuts.
Yeah,
come on. Absolutely. So good to see. I can't remember the last time I saw him soar up to the rim like that. Yeah. It was probably
Bogdanovich. He waved whoever the help defender was, and he was like, "Get out of here." And I think Bogdanovich is gonna have to start next game, so that's nice as well.
Yeah, good luck with that. Now that I've said that, he'll probably hit 10
Yeah, he won't miss a shot, but he'll give it back on the other end.
Yeah, we've got to give White and Brogdon their flowers. I think, we've already done so with Derek White so far in this series, so maybe we can skip over him, which feels like a sin to do so.
Derek White, 18 points, just whatever, dude. No.
Brogdon, though, if you go back and watch the last few minutes of the first quarter and the first few minutes of the second quarter, Jalen Johnson only played about 5 minutes, and those 5 minutes feature Malcolm Brogdon absolutely playing him off the court. It is ridiculous how just much he dominates him, and the size disparity there. You'd think that Jalen Johnson, pretty athletic wing, although quite young, would have some sort of physicality advantage over Malcolm Brogdon. No, sir. No, sir. He was played off the court within 5 minutes. It was incredible. Anyone else from this game or the series, Forsberg, that you want to kind of, shed a spotlight on as far as impact? We haven't talked about Sam Hauser yet and how his defense is kind of held up, and we've seen some spot minutes from Grant Williams. Any other sort of notable takeaways from your perspective?
You don't want to talk about the 2 minutes of Muscala or whatever that.
We can.
I like that Joe tried it.
Yeah,
yes.
I keep going back to it. I think it's good that he's just keeping guys engaged, letting them know that there might just be a situation where they get thrown in there because we know it's going to happen. You're going to get a bunch of Blake probably against Philly and Milwaukee. Like they torched Doc Rivers. That Philly game he started, and Milwaukee, like when he was on the Nets, he played a ton of it. So there's going to be time for all these guys for, in instances, and heaven forbid again, we've talked about them being good health wise. The one I guess I would bring up is Al. And so when I was watching Al,
this is why you're a friend of the show, because you just take the words right out of our mouths.
It's like you're looking at our run sheet right now.
Yeah, legend.
I know it's easy because we're just suckers for the box score, and I guess if you look and you're just surface level, you'll say, oh, the plus minus is crazy for a guy that didn't score and took 2 shots. But I go back to it. I love that more than anybody. Like Joe can say to him, just go box out for 30 minutes, and like that's all we need you to do. Defend and box out, and we'll be cool. And Al just goes, okay, and goes and does it. And I'm sure he would have liked a couple more threes in there, but he's not going to sweat it. It's the bottom line is winning. And I don't think this has been his finest defensive series. He's been put on an island a lot, and the Hawks certainly took advantage of that drop and then putting him in isolation against Trey. And, look, really good defenders, let alone 37-year-old big men are going to struggle in that instance. I just like that. The NBA's box out metric is fluky at best. I'm not even sure how it's quite derived. I don't suspect that there's someone there looking to see if they're putting their butt in someone else's stomach and, kind of driving them backwards. I suspect it's based on like proximity. And yet here's Al, and he had as many box outs in that game 4, 7, as the Celtics had total in games 2 and 3. And so even if it's a fluky metric, it's still noticeable when he's made it a priority. He did the same thing in game 1 when the Celtics obviously came into the series saying they gotta be committed on that. And so shout out to Al, who just relentless desire to win, and it doesn't matter if he doesn't care if he gets his flowers, if anyone notices. It's just like as long as they keep winning and they got another chance to win a title, he's going to be fine with it.
Yeah, like this team has talked about sacrifice a lot, whether it's Brogdon, and yesterday, Al Horford, one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, gets to take 2 shots. I'm gonna have to go back and look at the last time Al Horford had 3 offensive rebounds in a game. Like that does not feel like something that happens very often. I had to look at like the 2-man lineup data just because it feels like Al's been really good there. Minimum 20-minute line. Brogdon and Al have the highest net rating 2-man group at 42.2, 45 minutes, and the most played 2-man lineup is Tatum and Al. 125 minutes at 14.8. And you just go through like the top 14 lineups. Al's in like 7 of them.
Yeah.
he's the man. Playoff Al, dude. You just love to see all those little notes being hit by everybody playing their role, which is why I think you should be very high on this team going forward.
Yeah, and with Al, we've talked about this on the pod before, but, you're the ball handler in pick and roll. Al's playing back and drop. You come around that screen. What's the first thing you see? Al's beautiful eyes. It's completely mesmerizing you. What do? You can't be expected to perform. We're going to wrap the pod here with our miscellaneous section, which is everything that didn't have enough legs to appear in the A or B block here. So, Forsberg, how sure of victory were you in this game when you saw confetti prematurely falling from the roof?
Someone had a great tweet about it. I wish I could remember who it was, but it sort of said like it's only happened twice, but it just because it doesn't happen, it just seems like notable that it's happened twice against the Celtics, and it feels like a good omen whenever it comes down. Now, there have been like random stray pieces that are falling from TD Garden, and maybe we'll just notice it more. But every concert now involves a inordinate amount of confetti, and why people can't seem to release it in proper doses is beyond me. But the fact that the game actually had to be stopped for a minute, and that Luke Cornett plucked one out of the air. And it added a little flair to it. But yeah, if you had any doubt, the series was curtains at that point. It felt like that was a nice little tribute
for sure.
Yeah, that was a no-brainer at that point. Game over. You may as well pack it up at that point. I'm glad you put this in the notes, Ben, because I forgot about this in the smart segment. Was, I know the mask came off, but it was the Jalen Smart come here when Jalen tried to throw like 2 turnovers in like 7 seconds towards the end of the first half, and Smart's like, breathe, my friend. And Jalen's like, I'm sorry. That was what I imagined the dialogue was in my head. That felt like, honestly, the thing that changed it more. Obviously, halftime happened, and they probably was a more extended thing. But like the Jalen and Smart relationship, like I think is one of my favorite things. Like they've just gone through so many disagreements and battles, and like in the heat of the moment when like Smart like could have easily just like at first like, bro, what are you doing? What the fuck are you doing? And Jalen's like, I know, I'm sorry. And it's just like no harm, no foul. And then bang, comes out and is peak Jalen in the second half. Like I think gotta give Captain Smart a little extra love for that one.
They've come a long way since Smart was throwing tables at him or whatever in the bubble, flipping stuff over. But yeah, their relationship is so funny because they literally like been through wars and screamed at each other 100 times, and yet they're probably the closest on the team because of it. And the backdoor connection when they run that little action, and I mean, man, every time I see the Hawks fall for it, I'm like, man, how much tape do you got to watch to know that they're going to do this like twice a game? So yeah, shout out to those guys for being able to reel each other in. Probably, I hope it goes both ways. I hope that Jalen feels confident enough to go up to Marcus and be like, dude, all right, enough with the threes, and same deal, like breathe, go back to playmaking.
Let's hope so. We'll wrap with this. This is obviously just announced about an hour or so before we started recording. Ime Udoka to the Houston Rockets. Forsberg, obviously, there was some speculation as to where he could go. Toronto was a leading candidate. You talked with Brian Robb earlier today about Philadelphia possibly being a good destination. It's the Houston Rockets. How surprised are you by that outcome?
I am a little surprised. And so I guess from the perspective of like, he had to know Toronto and him and Ujiri are like really close, and Nigerian basketball roots. They had to have had some conversation, and, maybe they were just honest and said like, look, for our culture, for where we're going, it's just, we can't do this. But he also had to know, like, I think if Philly gets bounced, that's going to be a pretty great job for anybody. And he has time there. And I just thought that was sort of like a more obvious opportunity for him. But yet again, like, maybe he couldn't wait to find out if that would happen, because he can't be out of basketball for 2 years or, waiting for maybe even worse situation. So why not roll the dice? Hope you get Wembanyama. Hope, this core that at least beat the Celtics earlier this year is intriguing enough. I think selfishly from a Celtics perspective, it's good that he's not in the Atlantic Division, because it's not a constant headache. Like 4 times a year having to do it, or if it's Toronto when they play them in the preseason too, it's like, it feels like it would be just a perpetual storyline. And I think the timing is probably as ideal as it could have been. My fear was that, you beat Philly, they fire, and then you get the immediate reports that they're going to hire Ime, and then you're into the Eastern Conference Finals, and now you're answering questions on him coming to the division and him coming to a rival, and, back with like the whole hoopla that we went through with the Brooklyn situation. So, I don't know. I guess that's just where my mind goes, is in terms of, I know how much Brad Stevens doesn't want distractions, and like it's part of the reason he signs all these guys to extensions and tries to limit the drama. And that's part of the reason like Joe got the nod at midseason. Like, just everything you can do to make your players individually and as a team focused on the collective goal is important. And this is something they can't control. And yet I think the distraction will be limited. It will certainly bubble up because Ime is going to have a press conference. He's invariably going to have to answer some questions that, we all kind of want some answers to. And I'll be interested to see like how or if that has any effect on the team. My guess is hopefully enough time has passed to negate any of the potential for it to derail you even for a short time.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if we get more details, and now that Udoka actually is going to be speaking in front of the media now consistently. Yeah, I think if they offered you the job, you kind of there's 30 of these things, and you just have to jump at it. Like someone like Quinn Snyder surprised me for jumping into the Hawks when there's like a lot of could be Philly, could be Mavericks. There's a lot of potentially better situations. Look, the situation in Boston, one of the all-time kind of bad decision-making things, like to go from this core Jalen and Jason set up for the next however long versus we just saw that comment there from Christopher Feely, maybe you get Harden, but it's like Jalen Green and Şengün, and you're praying with a 14% chance you get Wembanyama. I don't know if that's a playoff team. Like the West is good, probably going to be better again next year.
Mm-hmm.
That's a disaster of a defensive team, even if James Harden does make it over there. I'm on record as saying I think Wembanyama is not going to reach the ceiling of SGA just for fun, as just for a bit of a zag. But yeah, it's and I would just like to there's going to be he fixed the Celtics culture, and maybe he can fix the Rockets culture. And I just don't think that the Celtics culture ever really specifically needed fixing. That year that they went 500, like that COVID year where Tatum had COVID and Jalen did his wrist. Mm-hmm. As much as Danny Ainge did for the Celtics, Tristan Thompson and Daniel Tice were the double bigs that we were running, as opposed to Al Horford and Rob Williams, Jeff Teague.
Jeff Teague.
You give me flashbacks.
Yeah. Jeff Teague, Shemi, Jabari Parker, that roster, the fact that they got to 500 was, I think, more a testament to Marcus, Jalen, and Jason than anything else. The culture is those guys are now, to me. And obviously Brad still being there. And you can see with Joe coming in, obviously a good coach, but I think you got to give credit where credit's due to those guys because they've been winning for 5+ years now, and that's the common denominator.
Absolutely. Well, look, we better wrap it up there. Look, that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we're 50-50. Maybe going to fire up our playback watch party room for Game 5, so keep an eye on our socials for that. Chris Forsberg, it's always great having you on. Good luck with all the coverage for the remainder of the season. I hope it includes coverage of the Celtics' 18th championship. Thanks so much for coming on. Thank you, guys. As always, let's get back together if this thing keeps rolling. Yeah, sounds good. Absolutely. All right, Jake Eisenberg, love your work, mate. We'll be back with another pod later in the week. Until then, go Celtics.